Hi, so a few weeks ago I did a presentation on SvelteKit, diving into animations, form actions, server-side rendering, things that I'm quite passionate about like progressive enhancement, gradual degradation, optimistic updates, and I think I already mentioned for animations. So I did a talk for the local meetup here. It's for junior developers. I think 5 people turned up, including myself, but it's still sorry to interrupt, I just forgot. So that junior developer talk, it took place on the 21st of October 2025, and today is the 31st of October 2025, plus links to the presentation, the blog post, and even a demo is all be in description down below. Now back to the video talk that I gave, and that's something I kind of want to do in the future, is more presentations, more talks, more sharing ideas out there. But in this video I'm going to kind of give just a brief demonstration of what I talked about, like the talk itself, the blog post, as well as like a live demo of an application that goes through form actions, animations, progressive enhancement, optimistic updates, and as well as accessibility things. So basically in the presentation, I've got the slides here, and let me just skip to the next section. So I provided a QR code. I talked about where I worked, which is at iSpace. I also incorporated like my hobbies, where things like jiu-jitsu, Latin dance, and PPL, like private parts license. My coach, dance teacher, and even my flight instructor talk about mastering the basics. And I think that's really key for web development. Because we've got AI tools, a lot of things can be done from a top level approach. Like you don't have to know much to actually produce something on the web. The basics get forgotten. And I think it's kind of the same with, that's sort of the same effect with jiu-jitsu, dance, and learning to fly, right? People care about the cool things you can do, like the cool submissions or really cool dance moves you can do. But they forget about the absolute fundamentals. So that's kind of why I brought this up with the hobbies that I do. And I talk about Svelte and what is SvelteKit. I guess you can talk about SvelteKit as being a meta framework, whereas Svelte is like the UI framework. It's really a web framework, like you've got React to Next or Vue to Nuxt. But I really like the idea of, Svelte is a user interface framework. We're building a user interface on the web. And I think what makes Svelte stand out is the creator, Rich Harris. So 2 talks that really got me enjoying, or really like agreeing with what Rich Harris has to say, is rethinking reactivity as well as North Star. So rethinking reactivity looks at the differences between React and Svelte in terms of you've got the virtual DOM doing a refresh of the entire component on change, versus with Svelte you've got fine-grained reactivity. And North Star, I really enjoyed Rich Harris talking about the Svelte tenets, the 10 Svelte tenets. So things like HTML as a mother language. Off the top of my head, HTML being the mother language, and what else? Like this, the web being sacred, doing good things, because like I believe, you can put a website up there, but it may not have optimistic updates, it may not have good user experience, and these things you can do on a bare minimum. But I think just doing the extra, because we treat web with respect. That's where I think we can make, I guess, the world a better place. Well, that's what I could do to make the world a better place, because it starts with me. This is a book I wanted to bring up. It's a book by Val Head. I had it here somewhere. Here it is here. It'll come to focus. So this book is basically about, it's about animation. So this is what really got me into the talk I wanted to give was, building interface animation, because animation is not about making things look pretty, although it can be about that, but it's also about improving user experience, and we'll talk about that in a second. I also talked about the server-client relationship, because I think this is really important. It gets forgotten because, we like with React and things like that, we tend to run things on the client, versus, if we're in a first world country where you've got a really good, decent computer that's going to work well, but you've got to think about people who don't have the best connections or the best computer. That's where you want to run most of your code on the server. But the downside to running everything on your server is you don't have the interactivity that the client gives you. So how do you balance the two? I think that's what Svelte was really good at. And now we jump into like a demo-ish sort of thing. I'm just going to go through my blog, and I've got GIFs at every stage that I show the demo. So let me get out of this and to the blog post itself. So you can see Yeah, another talk by Ken Kunz really got me into really got me into the idea of animation. This is what introduced me to animation in Svelte, which led me to the book by Val Head. So really great talk. I regularly recommend that to watch. And when we talk about animation, it's really important to understand that there's probably things that are more important than animation, even though animation is important on its own. Like you obviously got to make sure that when you're building a feature or a product, it's actually solving the user problem. And making sure that it's actually reliable and it's delivered on time, and then animation comes in probably lower down the priority list. But I like to argue that it's difficult to talk about it in terms of a priority list, because when you buy a car, some people buy a car solely on its color, and the color is actually really important. But the color has nothing to do with how the car runs or its safety and things like that. So that's what animation is. It's kind of that analogy, if that makes sense. I also want to talk about, and I mentioned before, is progressive enhancement and optimistic update. So I think these things are really good, really important in producing a good web experience, and these things tend to get looked over. I also talk about why animation is important, and this really comes from the book by Val Head, Designing Interface Animations, where animation, it's not there to make things, it can make things look pretty, but it's there to improve user experience. So one example is reducing cognitive load. Now, hopefully the example that I'll show you kind of demonstrates that. So the idea is you can reduce cognitive load with visual cues, with movement, things moving around. If you're doing animation, it's a good opportunity to showcase your brand. So for example, the company I work for, we use things like Blur because we're a company that focuses on vision. And if you're doing things like small animations, because it comes lower down the list of priorities, like you can do the bare minimum, just have a product, deliver it on time, but the extra cherry on top, it just shows as a developer that you care about your product deeply. So that's why I think animation is important. So we're going to give an example. And this is very similar to the drop problem I had at work, where you have a color a material selector for lenses, right? But I've just done color to make it simple, and I do apologize, I did color without a U. So yeah. So we've got the idea here where we've got a color selector, and then we need to make sure that color selector has colors that we want active, and then we need to change that order of colors. So as a Easter egg, this is supposed to be, or I think most of the colors in Te Reo Māori, but in the belt order colors from Jiu-Jitsu. So you got red up the top, Pango is black, Paiori is brown, which is the brown belt. Then you got Waipotopoto, which is purple. And you got Ma is white. We're missing blue, which is Kakariki. No, well, we'll find out later. So the next stage is we've got the admin interface here, right? And this is where basically admin user can change the order of the colors as well as activate and deactivate colors. And I think, yeah, Kahurangi is blue. So you can see as you're clicking the buttons, there's a refresh of the page. It's very fast, that refresh of the page, but there's a refresh of the page. You see things moving, but it's not quite easy to tell. Like you can imagine if this is a really big list, it's very difficult to see the changes that are going on. So the first stage we can incorporate is getting rid of that page refresh. We can use Ajax for that. So Svelte provides a really great interface to be able to do that. I won't show code, but I just want to show you the example of what can be done. And I think the code is always it's in GitHub, it's in different separate branches. But the idea is when you click a button, instead of a page refresh, we can click the button, show a loading state to the user, and then once the server's done its thing, so basically it's reordered it in the database, sends it back to the user, then it shows that the updated state. So that's kind of like the first stage. The next stage is, because it's still difficult to tell what's going on, like there's no page refresh, we know it's loading when you click the button, we get some feedback, but it's difficult when things move around in like a really fast way. So what's the next thing we could do? We could add animations. And that's what we've done here with the next step. So hopefully you can see as you click a button, so if I promote something, it swaps places with the color above it. You can see when we deactivate Marfit, you see it go into the deactivated column. So for the user, it helps them not have to think about, what was the change that happened when there was a change. You can see that change happening in real time. Sort of real time. So the downside to what we have right now, the one thing we could improve is looking at improving responsiveness. So we talked about that server-client relationship. What's happening here is you click the button, you get a loading state immediately from the client-side code, but we need to wait for the server to reset the state because it goes to the server, the database does the job and then sends us the new order of action, or what's been activated and deactivated. So could we make it could we improve it in a way that we get that instant feedback? And we can actually do that. So you can see, just to really drill that point at home, is when you click that button, the feedback is not instant. You've got to wait for it to happen, which we can improve upon. And that is called optimistic updates. So yeah, like I said, that server-client relationship, you've basically we're clicking a button that sends the information to the server, that sends the new state back to the client, updates our action. So if the server is all the way in Australia, for example, and you're a client, you're a user all the way in Europe, you're going to get a bit of delay and lag. So that can cause a bit of disconnect and not a great user experience. So that's where optimistic updates can help. So in the example here, you can see that when I click a button, I get instant feedback. There's still a loading state. So on the client, we're running some code where we're changing the order of, what these basically arrays, right? Like we're looking at an array of inactive materials, and we are, when we hit deactivate, we're adding to that array. When we're promoting, we're changing the order of elements in the array, and we can do that on the client instantly. And that provides, a really good experience, because you click something, you get that instant feedback. We do provide a loading state, so just in case, your server is disconnected and you are doing these you're doing these, these changes, then when your server reconnects, you'll get the state would sync up again. So for those kind of rare moments, so you're not just changing things and it's not reflecting back in the database, or you can show an error or things like that. But I've not included that in this example because I just want to show those particular steps, going from page refreshing to no page refreshing to getting motion immediately through clicks. Now, the next thing is about animating responsibly. So on most operating systems, I believe, Macintosh, Windows will have these options. You can actually reduce the motion. So motion can cause, people who have got vestibular issues, they can get vertigo from motion and things like that. So they prefer to have reduced motion or animations basically turned off. So you can see the situation here. We've turned off animations, and as I'm clicking the buttons, we don't get the movement. We still don't get that nice experience where you can see the things moving around, but that's a trade-off you have to make, because people who don't want motion, they can't. The vertigo is probably worse than the cognitive overload, cognitive load of having to know where things are moving. So it's kind of that trade-off, and we want to build applications for all users. So we can't give everyone the same experience, but how do we layer that experience and what the user wants? So one example is turning off animations if they don't want it. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is progressive enhancements, something that I'm very passionate about as well. So like I said, coming back to the idea, we can't give everyone that experience. So people who do have JavaScript working, they've got good connections, we want to give them the best experience. But then people who don't have JavaScript or they've got a slower connection, we still want to give them at least some functionality. So this is quite subtle in this example here. We've simulated basically JavaScript being turned off or broken, and then it comes back again. That can happen because JavaScript is the last thing to load on your web page. You get HTML, CSS, which can be quite quick, and then JavaScript might take a while to come in if you've got a slow connection. But you still want to provide some functionality. So as we click the promote button, we get that page refresh, and then let's say JavaScript loads up again, we get our interactivity. Cool, and that's basically the end. So what did we learn about? We learned about Svelte in a very brief manner, and we talked about how important it is to provide animation if you can, not providing animations when the user doesn't want it, as well as looking at optimistic updates to provide good feedback, and as well as if you don't have not all users can have the same experience depending on the constraints of their machine. How do you provide some functionality when some things aren't there, like JavaScript? Cool, so I hope you found this useful. Giving a talk like this was really a good experience for me. I enjoyed it. So I'm hoping you found this useful. If you have any feedback or tips, let me know. Speaking, writing these blog posts, just talking about things I've learnt and my ideas, it's really fun and something I want to get into. So if you have any tips for me, please let me know. Other than that, have a good day, and thank you very much for watching.